The White House is on your board of directors. You guys gave $50 million to the Obamas, as far as I can tell, to produce no discernible content whatsoever. How would you tell a Texan sitting at home to feel comfortable? CNN is already a dumpster fire. There's nothing resembling objectivity. There's nothing resembling journalism anymore. How are people at home, how should they feel even remotely confident that if this merger happens, the combined entity would not simply be a propaganda outlet pushing one particular political view with much greater market power than you have now?
Well, sir, we would fail. We would fail pushing a political view or propaganda. We deliver entertainment to consumers. Our consumers see our business pretty much the way they see America. About 40% conservative, about 40% liberal, about 20% don't know. And but when they turn on TV, they're tuned in to be entertained. And if we fail to entertain them by trying to promote propaganda or anything other than entertainment, we fail.
If you're watching this video today, chances are you've seen at least a clip, or maybe even the full footage, of the recent Senate hearing where Senator Ted Cruz questioned media executives from major entertainment companies about political bias. The exchange got heated, it got pointed, and it raised some questions that a lot of Americans, regardless of political leaning, have been asking for years. Today, on 45th Perspective, we're going to walk through what happened, why it matters, and what it says about the state of journalism, entertainment, and public trust in our media landscape. Before we dive in, if you're new to the channel, make sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss future breakdowns like this. And if you'd like to support thoughtful, in-depth analysis, you can do that over on Patreon at patreon.com/45thperspective. Your support genuinely helps keep this channel independent and able to tackle complicated issues without bowing to pressure from any side.
Mr. Campbell, same question to you.
We see the world very similar. We have a very broad range of content across not only HBO Max, but all of our platforms that we need to appeal to all audiences. Our content ranges from Hard Knocks from the NFL to shows like Deadliest Catch and Gold Rush. It's a very broad collection of programming that represents broad interests across America.
You have a wide range of programming on HBO. Name one program that is designed to appeal to conservatives.
We don't design our programming to appeal to
I can think of a lot that are designed to go to liberals. Name one.
None of our shows are designed to go to any political group. They're designed to appeal to...
Really, John Oliver's not designed to appeal to a certain group?
It's a program for which there's...
You just said none of your program is. Look, let me ask you, do you think CNN is fair and balanced?
I do believe CNN is a fair...
So when CNN showed riots and fires behind them, and you put a chyron, mostly peaceful but fiery protest, was that journalism?
Sir, I'm not involved with CNN, and in fact, they're not part of this transaction, but they have an independent editorial board, they have independent news gathering. We don't direct...
They have no independence other than hating Donald Trump, which is why their viewership numbers have plummeted, because they don't actually report news. They instead engage in very biased propaganda. And I will say, the truest words you said a minute ago is when you said with respect to Mr. Sarandos, well, he and I see the world in very much the same way. That is exactly the problem, that in the world of journalism, it should not be propaganda. In the world of entertainment, there is a reason why entertainers who are even slightly right of center get blackballed in Hollywood, writers get blackballed in Hollywood, actors get blackballed in Hollywood. And I've heard nothing today to give me any confidence that this merger would do anything other than make that problem much, much worse.
All right, let's get into it. The hearing we're talking about centered on a proposed media merger, but like a lot of modern congressional hearings, the discussion went far beyond the technical details of business consolidation. At the heart of the exchange was a bigger, more emotional question. Can Americans trust major media companies to be politically neutral, or at least to present information fairly? And if these companies merge into even larger entities, will that concentrate too much influence in too few hands? Senator Cruz's line of questioning focused primarily on concerns about left-leaning bias in news and entertainment. He referenced CNN repeatedly, arguing that the network no longer practices objective journalism. He also pointed to late-night programming and commentary-driven shows and used them as examples of content he believes is designed to appeal primarily to liberal audiences. In response, the executives pushed back on the idea that their programming is politically targeted. One argued that their audience base is naturally diverse, around 40% conservative, 40% liberal, and the rest somewhere in between, and that their job is to entertain, not to promote a political ideology. Another emphasized that their platforms distribute a wide range of content appealing to many different interests, from sports to reality series to documentaries. So that's the basic outline. But let's unpack what's really going on here. These hearings are never just about the literal business merger on the table. They are about the role media plays in American life. They're about trust, who we trust, why we trust them, and why so many people feel that trust has eroded. Cruz's argument reflects a concern held by many conservatives, that major media institutions lean left culturally, politically, or both, and that this shapes not only news coverage but also entertainment. Whether you fully agree with that claim or not, it's undeniable that trust in mainstream news organizations has dropped sharply over the past decade across the political spectrum. Conservatives tend to express the lowest trust, but liberals have also shown declines, especially when news outlets appear to stumble in accuracy or transparency. When Cruz brought up CNN's coverage of the protests, specifically the moment when a correspondent stood in front of burning buildings while a banner described the scene as mostly peaceful, he was appealing to an incident that has become symbolic for people who feel the media sometimes downplays information that complicates a preferred narrative. It's an emotionally potent example because visual evidence and verbal framing seem to contradict each other, and that kind of contradiction sticks in people's minds long after the news cycle moves on. Now, from the executive side, their defense wasn't political so much as business-oriented. They framed themselves as entertainment providers, not ideological actors. They argued that if they leaned too heavily in a political direction, they would lose large chunks of their audience. This is a point worth considering. Studios and streaming platforms do operate in a competitive marketplace. They need subscriptions, views, and broad appeal to survive. But here's where the discussion always gets more complicated. Even if executives don't consciously design content with a political goal, entertainment is created by people, writers, directors, actors, producers who have worldviews. Those worldviews naturally influence the stories they tell. It's impossible to completely strip that away. Every movie, show, or documentary is shaped by choices, and choices reflect values. The real question becomes, does that value set lean consistently in one direction because of who dominates the industry culturally? And if so, is it intentional, or is it simply a reflection of who gravitates toward these careers? There's also Cruz's point about people being blacklisted in Hollywood for being even slightly right of center. This is something that gets talked about fairly often. Some conservative actors and writers have said publicly that they feel pressure to hide their political views. Others in the industry dismiss that idea and say the only thing that matters is talent and professionalism. But it does seem to be a topic where experiences differ depending on whom you ask. Part of why this resonates is that Americans increasingly live in politically segregated environments. Not because of laws, but because of culture. People tend to cluster around others who think similarly, and industries develop dominant cultures that influence what becomes mainstream. Hollywood, academia, and newsrooms often lean left culturally. Law enforcement, the military, and many rural-based professions often lean right. In each environment, the dominant culture shapes what feels normal, acceptable, or controversial. When Cruz pressed the executive to name one show designed to appeal to conservatives, the executive responded by saying that none of their programming is created with a specific political group in mind. Now, on the surface, that answer sounds neutral, but it also highlights a tension. If a company genuinely wants to appeal broadly, why does it seem easier for audiences to point out politically left-leaning shows than right-leaning ones? One explanation might be that contemporary entertainment, especially prestige television, often explores themes that align more closely with modern progressive cultural concerns. Identity, systemic injustice, social change, dystopian critiques of power structures. Conservatives may not oppose those themes, but they might feel underrepresented in media narratives that reflect their own priorities or viewpoints. Another explanation is that political identity has become intertwined with cultural tastes. A show doesn't need to be explicitly partisan to feel ideologically aligned. Humor styles, values, worldviews, portrayals of institutions, all of that signals something to an audience. So while a network might genuinely not be thinking about liberal versus conservative during production, viewers interpret messages through their own lenses. Now, let's broaden the lens even further. When companies merge into larger conglomerates, it's not just about political influence. It's also about economic influence, how many platforms, networks, studios, and pipelines end up under one corporate umbrella. Critics worry that fewer companies controlling more content could mean fewer perspectives reaching the public. Supporters argue that mergers allow companies to compete internationally, invest in new projects, and keep up with the rapid shifts in streaming and technology. Both sides have legitimate points. Consolidation can streamline production, but it can also reduce diversity. Not necessarily political diversity, but artistic and creative diversity. With big mergers, there's always a risk of executives becoming overly cautious, prioritizing safe, already proven formulas over experimental or niche stories. People want a range of voices, even if they don't always realize it. They want comedies that make them laugh, dramas that make them think, and news that doesn't make them wonder whether they're being spun. And this is where the media trust crisis becomes a broader cultural challenge. The issue isn't just about liberals or conservatives. It's about whether Americans feel their perspectives are being respected, or whether they feel dismissed. When Cruz said that entertainers who are even slightly right of center get blacklisted, he was arguing that an ideological monoculture exists within the entertainment world. Whether that's fully accurate or somewhat overstated depends on whom you ask, but it reflects a wider anxiety. That political identity shapes opportunity, not merit. Now, let's talk about what the executives could have said, because part of the frustration some viewers felt watching the hearing wasn't just about what Cruz said, but about how the executives responded. Their answers were professional, controlled, and careful, but they were also vague. The moment Cruz asked for a concrete example, a show that appeals specifically to conservatives, the executive declined to name anything. Even if the point was that the company doesn't design shows based on political identity, leaving the question unanswered reinforces the perception that there's an imbalance. At the same time, Cruz's own argument has limitations. While the examples he used, like CNN's protest coverage, do resonate with conservatives who distrust mainstream news, they don't necessarily apply evenly across all networks or programming. Entertainment and journalism are not the same thing, even when they share a corporate parent. And while many conservatives have abandoned certain news outlets, others still trust local news, certain national programs, or individual journalists. Also, public perception of bias isn't one-sided. Many liberals believe that corporate consolidation in media leads to content that is too cautious, too influenced by advertisers, or too willing to avoid topics that could upset business interests. So while Cruz focused on left-leaning bias, others worry about corporate-driven censorship or bland neutrality that avoids hard truths. In other words, mistrust of media is now a universal phenomenon, even though the reasons differ. So where does that leave ordinary Americans watching all of this unfold? Most people aren't tracking every merger or every Senate hearing. They're asking simpler questions. Does the news tell me the truth? Does entertainment reflect the country I live in? Do I see people like me? Are differing perspectives shown respectfully or mocked? And perhaps most importantly, are the companies creating all this content transparent about what they stand for? These are fair questions. And hearings like this one give us a rare moment where executives and lawmakers have to confront them directly. Now, what do I personally think? I think Senator Cruz was right that media bias of all kinds is a legitimate concern. Anytime a large portion of the country feels that their views are misunderstood or dismissed, that's worth paying attention to. Whether or not someone agrees with Cruz politically, the underlying theme he raised, that trust must be earned, is extremely important. However, I also think some of the rhetoric in these hearings tends to oversimplify complicated cultural dynamics. Bias exists, yes, but it isn't always intentional, and it isn't always the result of coordinated political planning. Sometimes it's the natural product of where creative people live, the conversations they're surrounded by, and the cultural environment they work in. That doesn't excuse bias, but it does explain why it can be hard to root out. I also think the executives missed an opportunity to address public concerns head-on. Saying, "We don't design shows for political groups" is safe, but it doesn't satisfy anyone who feels legitimately unheard. A more honest response might have been acknowledging that creative industries do tend to skew left culturally, and that companies are aware of the need to diversify not just on demographic lines but on ideological ones too. Even saying, "We've heard these concerns and we're thinking carefully about how to broaden our creative voices," would have gone a long way. But I also want to acknowledge something important. Expecting absolute political neutrality from every media product might not be realistic. Humans create stories. Humans have opinions. Humans express those opinions through art. The goal shouldn't be sterilizing creativity. The goal should be ensuring a wide enough range of voices that no single worldview dominates the entire landscape. And that brings us to the core issue with mergers. It's not just about political influence. It's about the number of doors available for creators to walk through. When one company owns dozens of studios, networks, and platforms, even unintentional bias can ripple across a huge section of the industry. At the same time, the media world is evolving so quickly that consolidation is partly a defensive reaction. Streaming platforms are expensive. Production costs are high. Audiences are splitting across dozens of services. Companies are trying to survive in a hyper-competitive environment. And the truth is, no matter how big these mergers get, they don't control culture the way media giants once did. Creators today have alternatives. Independent platforms, podcasts, YouTube channels, crowd-funded projects. These offer outlets where people with all kinds of perspectives can build an audience without traditional gatekeepers. That's a good thing. It keeps the ecosystem healthier than it might have been 20 years ago. So here's where I land. Hearings like this matter because they bring these questions into the open. They force powerful executives to answer questions they might otherwise avoid. They force lawmakers to articulate concerns their constituents are feeling. And they remind all of us that media isn't some neutral, invisible force. It's a huge system run by real people making real decisions that affect how millions of Americans see the world. But hearings like this are also limited. They can highlight the problem, but they can't solve it. The real solutions come from the people. From demanding transparency, from supporting a range of creators, from being open to hearing perspectives we don't always agree with, and from recognizing that no single institution should ever have a monopoly on truth. As for the merger itself, time will tell whether it leads to more diversity of content or less, whether it helps the companies innovate or simply consolidates influence, whether it builds trust or erodes it further. The one thing that's clear is that Americans want media they can rely on. They want news that isn't slanted and entertainment that reflects a broad array of experiences. They want fairness, not sameness, but fairness. And they want to feel that powerful institutions listen to them. If hearings like this keep pushing that conversation forward, then they serve a purpose, regardless of how they sometimes devolve into political back and forth. All right, that wraps up today's analysis. I'm really interested in what you think. Do you feel major media companies lean too far in one political direction? Do you agree with the concerns raised at the hearing? Or do you think the issue is more complex than the soundbites suggest? Share your thoughts in the comments, and as always, keep the conversation respectful. Different viewpoints make these discussions richer, not weaker. Thanks for watching 45th Perspective. If you found this breakdown helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and consider supporting the channel on Patreon at patreon.com/45thperspective. Your support truly makes a difference. I'll see you in the next one.